Hey guys, tonight we will listen to a calm and gentle story that will help you relax and drift into a deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, make your bed comfortable, dim the lights, and allow your body to fully relax. Close your eyes, take slow, deep breaths. Let's begin the story. The train from Delhi reached Jaipur just before dawn, the hour when even the desert seems half awake. Aaric stepped out, his notebook pressed close to his chest, the air thick with the scent of dust and forgotten stories. He was a historian by degree, but something deeper had brought him here. A whisper passed through generations of scholars about an old hill fort that was erased from maps a century ago. Locals called it Bharavgarh, the silent fortress. The taxi driver who took him up the rocky road didn't say much. Just before they began the steep ascent, the man muttered, "Sahib, after sunset, people don't go up there. You'll find no one." Aaric had smiled politely. "That's exactly why I'm going." As the jeep climbed higher, the fort appeared, half-eaten by sand and wind. Its towers stood like broken teeth against a pale sky, and the main gate was swallowed by roots of old trees that had forgotten they were once seeds. For a moment, he felt a strange reverence, not fear, but something deeper, like standing inside the memory of time itself. He pitched his small tent near the eastern wall, beside what looked like an old temple ruin. The sun turned the stones golden for a brief while, but by evening, the colors drained away, leaving everything painted in gray silence. Bharavgarh wasn't just abandoned, it felt aware. Aaric walked through the inner courtyard, sketching fragments of carvings. Most were eroded, but he could make out the outlines of royal insignias, suns, serpents, and something else. 12 figures sitting in a circle. He ran his fingers over the stone, tracing the faded lines, whispering, "Who were you?" A sudden gust passed through the arches. The dry leaves on the floor scattered in circular patterns, almost mimicking the carving itself. That night, as he wrote his notes by lantern light, his pen stopped mid-sentence. There was again faint footsteps, not animal, not wind, measured, slow, human. He turned off the lantern. The darkness was complete. He held his breath. The footsteps stopped too. For a full minute, there was only silence, the kind that listens back. The next morning, Aaric met the only other soul who dared live nearby, an old man named Harjeet, who tended to a small shrine at the base of the fort. He had seen Aaric's campfire from afar and came carrying a brass pot of water. "You shouldn't stay alone, Sahib," Harjeet said softly, setting the pot down. "This place has rooms that never open and doors that remember who touched them." Aaric smiled, brushing it off as folklore. "Do you know about something called the Chamber of Shadows?" The old man's face tightened. He looked away, toward the fort's upper levels. "My grandfather said the kings here made a pact with silence itself. What they buried, no one should unearth. Do you know where the chamber is?" Aaric pressed. Harjeet hesitated, then pointed toward the inner sanctum. "There's a sealed door behind the throne hall. It's been closed since before my ancestors were born. Wax seals, royal symbols, no one breaks them." Before Aaric could ask more, the man started to leave. "Don't stay after dusk," he said, his voice trailing. "Even silence has a master here." By late afternoon, the sun began to lower, turning the fort's stones a dull red. Aaric climbed through the crumbling steps of the old palace. He found a throne hall, a massive room with columns cracked like old bones. A faded mural stretched across the ceiling. Kings and their courtiers offering something to a dark, shadowy figure. Time had eaten away its face. Behind the throne, half covered in dust and vines, was the thing Harjeet had spoken of. A door, carved in black stone, sealed with melted wax and royal crests. The wax bore the emblem of the Sun Throne dynasty, a symbol not seen in any museum catalog. 12 crests surrounded the seal in a perfect circle, the same 12 figures from his earlier carving. He brushed his fingers along one, and something like static passed through his skin. It wasn't just old stone. It was charged. He whispered to himself, "This isn't supposed to exist." He took out his notebook, carefully sketching the designs, noting the symmetry. Every pattern seemed intentional, not decoration, maybe a warning. He leaned closer, examining a crack near the edge of the door. Inside the crack, he swore he saw movement, a faint shimmer, like heat rising from sand. The air around him grew cold, unnaturally so. His breath fogged, though the desert outside still burned with heat. Somewhere behind the walls, a faint whisper crawled through the stone. No more kings, no more dawns. Aaric stumbled back, his heartbeat sharp in his ears. He looked around, but the hall was empty. Even the sound of the wind had vanished. Day 1. Found sealed chamber. 12 royal marks. Possible pre-14th century origin. Temperature fluctuation recorded. He tried to steady his breathing, but his hands wouldn't stop trembling. He placed his palm gently against the seal again, wanting to feel if it was truly vibrating or if it was just his pulse. It was like the entire fort took a single long breath. The dust lifted from the ground in slow motion, swirling around him. For a moment, he heard faint chanting, hundreds of voices overlapping, whispering names he couldn't understand. He backed away, heart racing, until he reached the courtyard. The sun had set without him noticing. Darkness had settled over Berovgar like a curtain. Back in his tent, Aaric played the recorder. Static, then faint words buried under the noise. He froze, rewound, played again. The same line, clear now. He stared at the door of his tent, afraid of what might be outside. The wind had stopped completely. Even the insects had gone silent. In that perfect stillness, he understood something strange. The door wasn't guarding treasure. It was guarding a memory. Unable to sleep, he lit his lantern and walked back toward the palace. He told himself he just wanted one last look before leaving tomorrow. But deep down, he knew he wouldn't leave. Not until he opened that door. As he entered the throne hall, the flame flickered violently, casting dancing shadows along the walls. He reached the black stone door again. The wax seals seemed different now, slightly melted, as if someone had touched them recently. And then he noticed something that chilled him. A handprint, fresh, on the lower part of the door. Not his. The lantern trembled in his grip. He whispered to no one. From the darkness beyond the door came a slow, deliberate sound. 3 knocks. Not echoes. Not illusion. Knocks. From the other side, Aaric stepped back, his breath shallow. He dropped the lantern. The flame died instantly. And for a few heartbeats, Berovgar Fortress was alive again, breathing in whispers older than history. The morning came slowly, as if the sun itself hesitated to touch Berovgar's walls. Aaric woke to the smell of dust and the hollow cry of a distant eagle circling above the ruins. His body felt heavy, his dreams full of echoes, knocks, whispers, and a name he could no longer remember. He washed his face with water Harjeet had left behind and sat outside his tent, staring at the fort in the pale light. The black door still glimmered faintly in his memory, as if it hadn't been a dream at all. He opened his notebook, 12 crests, central seal, unknown symbology, recorded anomalous sound, possible subchamber beyond door. He paused. Beneath the notes, he found words he didn't remember writing. The 13th must listen before the stones begin to speak. The ink was his, but the handwriting wasn't. Aaric returned to the fort's main hall before noon, determined to catalog the carvings more carefully. Sunlight cut thin lines through the roof, landing like golden blades on the dusty floor. The air smelled of copper and dampness, a strange scent for a desert ruin. He crouched before one of the side walls, a massive stone slab, engraved with faint symbols he hadn't noticed before. They weren't Sanskrit or Prakrit or any royal script he knew. The shapes looked more like memory than language, curved lines that spiraled inward, like thoughts turning on themselves. He traced one with a piece of charcoal, whispering, "What language do you dream in?" When he pressed his palm against the stone, it felt warm, not from the sun, deeper than that, like something beneath the surface was alive. As he copied the markings into his notebook, he felt it again, that quiet pressure in the air, like being underwater. Every sound seemed distant. Even his own breathing echoed oddly. He looked over his shoulder, nothing but long corridors and fallen pillars. Then, a faint breath, right beside his ear. He froze, turned. The hall was empty. He slowly lifted his camera and began recording, panning across the walls. The microphone caught a faint static hum, then a whisper so soft it almost dissolved in air. "Do not write what was never meant to be read." Aaric's heart stopped. He replayed the clip immediately. The words were there, clear, calm, ancient. Not threatening, just aware. He took a deep breath. "Okay," he muttered to himself, forcing a small laugh. "Maybe the acoustics in here." Another whisper interrupted him. He watches through the cracks. This time, it didn't come from the recorder. It came from behind the stone wall. Panic met curiosity inside his chest like twin flames. He grabbed his small chisel and flashlight, clearing the dust around the engraving. As he brushed away more of the debris, he found a larger carving, a circle divided into 12 parts, and in the center, a drop-shaped mark filled with crimson pigment that hadn't faded. The pigment shimmered faintly, still moist beneath centuries of dust. "The pact of blood." He said it aloud without meaning to, as if the word were already in his mouth. The ground beneath him vibrated once, soft, like a breath from the earth. He stepped back. His mind raced through every historical record he'd read. Secret councils, blood oaths, forgotten dynasties, but nothing matched this. This wasn't just a secret ritual. It was a contract. Evening fell faster than usual. The golden light turned gray, then violet, then disappeared altogether. Aaric set up his camera on a tripod, facing the wall where the symbols glowed faintly under the lantern. He spoke softly into the recorder. Day 2, Entry 1. Found possible evidence of non-documented royal dialect. Visual anomalies under light exposure. Local term, Chaya Sava, possibly translates to Council of Shadows or Chamber of Silence. He paused the recording. The playback began to distort again. Low murmurs like voices behind a thin curtain. He turned the gain up. Multiple voices, overlapping, chanting in rhythm. His translator's mind tried to catch fragments. Ekta, Rakt, Raja. Unity, blood, king. He scribbled quickly. Pact of blood equals ancient royal unity oath. But the whispers grew louder, pressing against the walls. The lantern flickered. For a split second, he thought he saw shapes moving in the carvings, shadows of 12 seated figures forming within the lines of stone. Then, silence again. Total, endless silence. He rushed out of the chamber, desperate for open air. The night sky above Berovgar shimmered with cold starlight. In the 13th must listen. History does not forget its witnesses. Aaric felt an ache in his chest. Fear, yes, but also fascination. It was as if history itself was speaking, unwilling to stay buried. He whispered to the empty room, "What do you want me to see?" And for the first time, the whisper answered clearly. "Our truth." At dawn, Aaric replayed the nights, recording frame by frame. In one brief flash, when lightning had struck far away, the video caught a reflection on the wall. Not just carvings anymore. Faces. 12 faint, ghost-like faces watching him through the stone, their eyes like melted gold. He paused the frame. His throat went dry. Each face was turned toward the center, where a 13th seat stood empty. He stared at it, unable to breathe. Then he noticed the face nearest the 13th space looked almost like his own. He closed the laptop and stepped outside into the morning light. The fort seemed quieter than before, as though holding its breath. He opened his notebook to jot down the new evidence and froze. The page he had left blank last night now contained a single line, written in that same unfamiliar hand. The stone remembers those who listen. Beneath it, smeared faintly in reddish brown, was the shape of a handprint. Not ink, not dust, something older. Aaric stared at it for a long time, then slowly looked up toward the black stone door inside the palace. The air around it shimmered again, and from deep within the wall came a final whisper, calm and almost grateful. The day after the voices, Aaric didn't speak a word. The desert had turned pale beneath the morning sun, and the fortress seemed almost still, like a photograph of itself. Dust floated through the halls like slow snowfall. His notebook lay open beside him, untouched. He hadn't written since the handprint appeared. He kept replaying the whisper in his mind. The 13th has begun to hear. The words felt like a sentence, not a message. By late afternoon, he decided to go back inside. He told himself it was only for documentation, just one more round of sketches before leaving for Delhi. But a quiet pull guided him deeper than before, beyond the halls he'd explored, to a part of the fort that had collapsed centuries ago. Half buried beneath broken pillars and old murals, he found a wall painted with fragments of royal imagery, a coronation, a throne, a circle of shadows around a kneeling figure. The colors had faded, but the emotion hadn't. As he brushed away the dust, one section of the mural cracked slightly beneath his hand. The sound echoed, hollow. Aaric leaned closer, his breath shallow. Behind the wall, a cavity. He pushed harder, and a piece of plaster gave way, revealing a narrow gap, large enough for a person to slip through. A scent of ancient oil and cold metal drifted out, the smell of something that had been locked away from air for too long. He switched on his flashlight and crawled inside. The passage descended sharply, the walls narrowing around him. The deeper he went, the quieter it became, until he could hear only the pulse in his ears. His footsteps fell soft on the stone floor, his light shaking slightly as he moved. Then the tunnel opened into a chamber. Bronze mirrors lined every wall, tall, curved, and covered in dust. The air shimmered faintly, as if the room remembered warmth. Aaric stepped closer, wiping one mirror with his sleeve. His reflection looked back at him, but wrong. The eyes were darker, older. There was a faint crown-shaped shadow on his forehead. He turned away quickly, breathing faster. Another mirror caught his movement. This time his reflection was dressed differently, in royal robes, holding a dagger with blood dripping from the blade. The eyes looked alive. He backed away, but the mirrors seemed to multiply in the light, reflections folding upon reflections. Each one showed him in another time, a scholar, a soldier, a priest, a king. Then one reflection smiled. The smile wasn't his. A voice came from everywhere and nowhere, deep and smooth like metal scraping stone. "Power never dies," it said. "It only changes faces." The sound vibrated through his chest. He stumbled, dropping his flashlight. It rolled across the floor, spinning light across the mirrors. For a heartbeat, every reflection turned its head toward him at once. He couldn't breathe. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the voice spoke inside his skull. You came to learn history, it whispered. You came to uncover truth. But truth has a cost. Do you accept it? Aaric shook his head, whispering, "This isn't real." The reflections laughed softly, 100 versions of him laughing in perfect rhythm. Then all at once, the mirrors cracked. A sound like thunder filled the room. Something struck his hand, hot, blinding, electric. He screamed and fell backward, the flashlight flickering out. Darkness swallowed everything. When he woke, there was only the faint glow of dawn filtering through a hole in the roof. The mirrors were silent again, their surfaces cold and still. Aaric's hand ached with a deep burn. He lifted it slowly and froze. In the center of his palm, etched deep into the skin, was a mark, a royal seal. The same symbol from the wax on the black stone door. He stared at it, half terrified, half entranced. The burn pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. He stood shakily, the echoes of laughter still somewhere behind his eyes. The mirrors now showed only his true reflection, pale and trembling. Yet in one of them, behind him, he thought he saw movement. A shadow, watching. When he turned, there was no one. Outside, the desert wind began to rise, carrying dust and whispers through the cracks of Beravgar. Somewhere deep below, the sealed door shuddered softly, as if something within had felt the mark awaken. Aaric pressed his burned palm against his chest. The pain steadied his breathing. The seal was real, and whatever it meant, it had chosen him. He whispered into the empty hall, "What do you want from me?" The air around him grew still again. Then, faint and almost kind, a voice answered, "To remember what you were." The night of the banquet had no moon. The palace torches burned with slow, golden light, and the air smelled of sandalwood and fear. Every sound in the corridor seemed deliberate, rehearsed. The shuffle of silk robes, the distant hum of ceremonial drums, the soft breath of men pretending not to tremble. In the great hall of Beravgar, before it fell into ruin, King Viraj sat beneath a canopy of woven gold. His crown was small, his gaze enormous. 12 figures stood before him, their faces hidden behind thin veils of silver thread. These were his council, the 12 shadows, the secret minds behind every war, every treaty, every quiet disappearance that had shaped the kingdom's fate. No one outside this room knew their names, not even the scribes who recorded history. The torches flickered as a servant poured wine into shallow copper cups. The liquid glowed like blood. King Viraj raised his cup slightly. "Tonight," he said, his voice low but sharp, "we decide the fate of the next century." One of the shadows spoke, a voice soft as dust. "Your Majesty, the northern clans have yielded. The gold routes are yours again." Another, "The priests of Varna await your command. They will erase all mention of your rivals from temple scripts." The king nodded, pleased, yet his eyes lingered on one man, tall, silent, standing slightly apart. The queen's brother, Rajan, his expression calm, unreadable, but his hands restless at his sides. King Viraj smiled faintly. "And you, brother my queen, what do you bring to this sacred table?" Rajan bowed, his silver veil brushing the marble floor. "A gift, my king, the gift of permanence." The words stirred quiet unease. "Speak," said the king. Rajan's voice lowered. "We build walls, raise armies, carve our names into stone. Yet time forgets us. Kingdoms vanish into dust. Even this palace will one day crumble. But what if it didn't?" The king's fingers tightened around his cup. "You speak like a priest, not a soldier. I speak like a man who fears being forgotten." The council shifted uneasily. One of the older shadows muttered, "No king defies time." Rajan smiled. "Not unless he bargains with it." A faint wind moved through the chamber. though no windows were open. The torches flickered toward the center of the table, where a black stone bowl had been placed. It had not been there before. The king frowned. "What trick is this?" Rajan stepped forward. "Not a trick, a pact. The priests of the old blood showed me the way. Each of us gives a drop, not of ink, not of oath, but of life itself. Bound together, we will never fade. As long as one of us breathes, the council remains eternal." The 12 exchanged glances beneath their veils. Temptation shimmered in the air like heat. King Viraj studied his brother-in-law in silence. "And what do you ask in return?" Rajan's smile deepened. "Only that our names remain unwritten. Power hidden is power preserved. The world will remember our acts, not us." The king looked into the black bowl. It seemed bottomless. In its depths, reflections shimmered, not of their faces, but of shadows moving behind them. A whisper, barely audible, crawled through the room. "Blood remembers what stone forgets." The king felt his pulse echo the sound. Slowly, he drew a dagger from his belt, its blade made of obsidian, sharp enough to part silence itself. "If we do this," he said, "we bind not just our lives, but our souls." Raja nodded. "That is the point." One by one, the shadows approached. Each pressed the dagger to their palm, letting a single drop fall into the black bowl. The liquid shimmered, red and luminous, absorbing their reflections. When it came to the king, he hesitated. His hand hovered above the bowl. He looked at Rajan, the man who smiled too easily. "What becomes of those who break this bond?" the king asked. Rajan's smile didn't fade. "They cease to exist, in history, in memory, even in death." The king exhaled and let his blood fall. The bowl pulsed once as if alive. The torches dimmed. The sound of the world seemed to fold inward. Somewhere unseen, a voice, not Rajan's, not the king's, whispered through the room. "The pact is sealed. 12 shadows, one crown. When betrayal is born, silence shall bury the light." A tremor passed beneath their feet. The mirrors on the walls quivered, and for a moment, each man saw himself crowned, seated on the throne, alone. Then it was gone. The king turned toward Rajan. "What have we done?" But Rajan only smiled, his eyes glinting gold in the dying light. "We have defeated time, my king." Outside, a storm gathered in the desert, the first in 50 years. Thunder rolled over the hills like a warning. The palace guards swore they saw the torches burn blue for a moment, before darkness swallowed them whole. That night, the queen awoke to screams echoing through the corridors. When she reached the banquet hall, the door was sealed from inside. The 12 shadows were gone. The king sat motionless at the head of the table, eyes open, lips parted as if mid-prayer. Beside him, the black bowl stood untouched, but it was empty. And on the marble beneath the throne, a single message had been carved in fresh blood. "Silence remembers." The storm raged until dawn. When it ended, the king was still alive, but something in his eyes had died. He ordered the chamber sealed forever, its name erased, its witnesses buried. He told the scribes to burn every record of that night. And when they hesitated, he whispered only once, "Those who write it will join them." And so Beravgar slept. The walls forgot. The world moved on. But beneath the palace, 12 O's kept breathing in the dark, waiting for the 13th voice, the one that would listen again. The storm had not stopped for 3 days. The sky above Beravgar was swollen with thunder, and every window of the palace trembled, as if the air itself refused to rest. Inside, King Viraj sat alone in his chamber, staring at a candle that refused to die. Its flame bent sideways, fighting the wind that slipped through the cracks. He hadn't spoken in hours. The queen waited at the door, her face pale, afraid to ask what haunted him. Finally, he said quietly, "I saw them." She froze. "Who, my king?" "The shadows," he whispered. "They were standing at the edge of my bed, all 12 of them, watching, but their eyes were empty." The queen's hand trembled. "The council?" He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw the truth in his face. Fear, raw and trembling, carved deeper than any scar. "They betrayed the crown," he said. "Rajan led them. The pact was never meant for me. It was meant to bind me, to make me the 13th shadow." Outside, lightning cut across the sky, spilling white light through the window. For a second, the queen saw figures, faint, translucent, standing behind her husband. Then the light was gone. The king rose. His voice grew steadier, colder. "Bring the guards. Seal the chamber. Tonight, silence will remember their names." The queen hesitated. "You mean to?" "Yes," he said. "No blood, no fire, only walls. Let them whisper their crimes to the stone they worship." The palace bell rang once, deep, hollow, final. Torches flared along the corridors as soldiers descended into the lower halls, carrying iron chains and molten wax. The sound of their boots echoed like drums of judgment. The 12 shadows waited in the banquet hall, unaware that the door behind them was already being sealed. The king entered, unarmed, wearing white instead of royal red. "My brothers," he said softly, "the pact you offered me has been broken, not by time, but by treachery." Rajan stepped forward, still calm. "You misunderstand what eternity demands." "No," said the king. "I understand too well." He nodded once. The guards moved swiftly, slamming the gates shut. The clang of metal echoed through the chamber like thunder trapped in stone. Rajan's expression didn't change. "You cannot bury us," he said. "We are already beneath you. We are the roots of your throne." The king walked closer until their faces were inches apart. "And roots," he whispered, "can be poisoned." He lifted a bronze bowl, the same that once held their blood, now filled with molten wax. One by one, he poured it over the seals carved into the walls, sealing each symbol with fire. The scent of burning resin filled the chamber, choking the air. The shadows began to shout, not in anger, but in language older than words. The torches flickered, and the light bent around them. "Majesty," one cried, "you are binding the living with the dead." The king's eyes burned. "Then may they keep each other company." The great door groaned shut. From the other side came the pounding of fists, the echo of voices fading into the stone. Then only whispers. The queen turned away as molten wax sealed the final crack between door and wall. "What will happen to them?" she asked. The king's answer was quiet. "They will remember. Forever." That night, the palace shook once more, a tremor that no one could explain. The torches went out by themselves, and the air grew heavy, thick with something that wasn't quite silence. In the days that followed, servants swore they could still hear soft murmurs beneath the marble floor. When the king walked past the sealed chamber, the candlelight in his hand always dimmed, as if the air itself recoiled. The queen never spoke of it again, but the king began writing. On the last page of his journal, words no one was meant to read. "We buried their bodies, not their voices. Every lie returns as an echo. And one day, someone will hear." Centuries later, that same page would be found, half burnt, half intact, by Aaric in the ruins of Beravgar. And when he touched the wax-sealed wall, the whispers began again. At first, they were faint, like breath moving through dust. Then clearer, 12 voices in unison, repeating the same words the king once feared most. "Blood remembers what stone forgets." Aaric dropped his camera. The sound of it hitting the floor was swallowed instantly by silence. He turned his flashlight toward the wall. The wax was cracked, faintly but enough. Behind it, something moved, And the whisper came again, closer this time. The days stopped meaning anything. Aaric no longer counted them, only the length of shadows on the wall, only how long the light stayed before slipping away. He had moved into the ruins entirely now. His tent, his notebooks, the cameras, all buried in dust and silence. The villagers no longer came up the hill. The path had grown over with thorn and dry grass, as if the mountain itself wanted to forget the way. Inside the fort, Aaric had found a staircase behind a fallen column. It descended deep, farther than any royal structure had reason to go. Each step he took left a print in centuries of untouched dust. The air grew colder, heavier, until he began to hear the faint hum again, the same low vibration that had followed him since the night the whispers began. He told himself it was wind. He stopped believing that by the third night. He worked without rest. His hands were raw from scraping the stone. His voice had gone thin from whispering notes to himself. The royal seal burned into his palm still throbbed, sometimes faintly, sometimes like a heartbeat not his own. At first, it had been a mark. Then it became a key. He noticed the walls reacting to it. When he brushed the symbol against the carvings, lines of ancient script faintly glowed, then vanished again, as though afraid to be seen. He recorded everything, or tried to, but the footage never lasted. Each morning, when he checked his camera, the screen flickered with static. Sometimes he'd see his own reflection, sleeping, but the frame showed him standing beside himself, awake, watching. He stopped recording after that. His notebook had started to change, too. One night, while reviewing his sketches, he noticed words written in a hand not his own. Finer, older ink. The sentences read like a continuation of his own notes, but the voice was different. The seal opens only for those who remember the vow. The 13th voice must choose silence, or all will awaken. He stared at the page until dawn. The ink had dried long ago. That morning, when he looked into his mirror, the small steel one he kept in his pack, he thought his face looked older. Not tired, not aged. Older, as if his skin remembered a century he'd never lived. His eyes seemed darker, the irises ringed with a faint gold shimmer. He laughed once quietly. "The air's playing tricks," he whispered. But even his voice didn't sound like his anymore. By the fifth day underground, he no longer needed a torch. The faint glow from the inscriptions guided him, breathing light through the corridor, leading him towards something buried deeper. He stopped eating. The hunger had left him, replaced by something else, a pull, a promise. His dreams were no longer his own. In them, he sat at a marble table surrounded by 12 empty chairs, hearing the sound of dripping wax. Each time he woke, the same words echoed inside his skull. Blood remembers what stone forgets. He began writing in the logbook again, but the pen didn't feel right in his hand. At first, he thought the words were his. Then one night, half asleep, he saw his own fingers moving, writing without him. The lines formed slowly, neatly, in that same unfamiliar hand. "We are not dead. We are waiting for the 13th. The historian has come home." Aaric stared at the ink until his eyes blurred. The candle beside him flickered, then stilled, as if holding its breath. Somewhere beneath the stone floor, faint murmurs began to rise. He could hear them now, clearly, 12 distinct voices whispering at once. Their rhythm matched his heartbeat. He pressed his palm to the ground, and the royal seal burned brighter. For a moment, the wall across the room rippled, like water disturbed by sound. Behind it, he saw shadows, not shapes but outlines turning toward him. Then a single voice, calm, close, spoke right behind him. "You found us." Aaric spun around. No one was there. The candle had gone out. In the dark, He could hear his notebook flipping pages by itself. Then, soft scratching, writing. He struck a match with shaking hands. The flame revealed the open page, still wet with fresh ink. Descend. The word pulsed faintly, as though alive. He dropped the match. The darkness swallowed everything again, except the faint echo of 12 whispers calling his name. And somewhere far above, in the ruins of Beauregard, the sealed wax on the ancient door cracked just a little, enough to breathe. The last seal broke with a sound that didn't belong to stone. It was softer, like breath escaping a closed mouth. Aaric stepped back. The wax crumbled under his fingers, releasing a faint scent of burnt sandalwood. The air around him thickened, vibrating with a low hum, almost like a sigh after centuries of silence. He raised his lantern. The door before him, carved with the royal insignia, now pulsed faintly, the gold lines shifting as though veins beneath skin. He touched the seal on his palm to the pattern. It responded immediately, glowing with the same dull amber. Then came the sound, the slow, heavy click of old mechanisms awakening, followed by the grinding groan of iron against stone. The door moved. Not opened, moved, sliding inward into the dark. Cold air rushed out, old enough to taste of dust and memory. Aaric stepped inside. The chamber stretched wider than any hall above it. Vast, circular, its ceiling supported by pillars that disappeared into shadows. The air shimmered faintly, filled with dust motes that floated like ghosts of forgotten prayers. At the center stood 12 stone chairs, arranged in a perfect circle. Each chair carried a thin layer of dust that looked almost like ash. On the armrests of each lay a small indentation, the shape of a human hand. And on each headrest, carved deep into the stone, was a symbol of a crown. But one chair, directly opposite the entrance, was different. It was clean. No dust, no imprint. Empty. Waiting. Aaric's heartbeat slowed, then quickened. He approached it slowly, footsteps echoing softly in the still air. The closer he came, the more he felt the pull, a quiet insistence beneath his skin, calling him forward. He lifted his lantern higher. On the wall behind the empty chair, words shimmered faintly in an ancient script. He reached out to trace them, but before his fingers touched, the letters began to shift, burning faintly gold, rearranging themselves into words he could understand. The 13th will come to listen. The flame of his lantern bent toward the wall, as if drawn by it. He swallowed hard. Listen to what? He whispered. The echo of his own voice seemed to answer, multiplied, stretched, distorted. Listen to us. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere, soft, layered, impossible. The chairs seemed to lean closer. The temperature dropped. The light flickered and steadied again, revealing faint figures seated in the dust. Not solid, not alive, but present. 12 faint shapes, outlines of men and women, their faces blurred like smoke. Each wore a faint crown of light above their head, gold fading into gray. Aaric couldn't breathe. His legs trembled. The empty chair behind him creaked, as though something unseen had just taken its place. He turned slowly. The chair was still empty, yet the stone beneath it was warm. He raised a shaking hand, the one marked by the royal seal, and the glowing pattern on his palm pulsed again. The 12 voices spoke together, low and even. You carry the mark. You have opened what was sealed. The 13th has come. Aaric shook his head, backing away. I'm just a historian. I came to remember the voices finished. And so you shall. The air rippled. The lantern flickered violently. Aaric's surroundings blurred. The walls, the pillars, the dust, until all that remained was the circle of 12 chairs and the whispering wind that seemed to breathe through him. his mind filled with flashes, not memories but visions. He saw King Viraj at the banquet table the moment the pact was sealed. He felt the heat of molten wax, the sting of betrayal, the scream that was never recorded. And beneath it all, the heartbeat of the earth itself, slow and ancient. When he blinked, he was kneeling before the chairs, his hand pressed to the stone floor. The seal on his palm had burned deeper, its lines now glowing through the skin like molten gold veins. The whispers quieted. One voice, deeper, older, spoke alone. Every century, one returns, not to rule, but to remember. Aaric's lips trembled. Remember what? That silence is never empty. The words echoed through the chamber, lingering like mist. Then, one by one, the faint crowns above the chairs dimmed and vanished, all except the empty one. Its light grew brighter, golden, wrapping around Aaric's face. For a moment, his reflection appeared faintly in the dust, seated on that 13th chair, eyes closed, calm. Then the light went out. Only his lantern remained, small, flickering, fragile. Aaric stood alone in the dark hall, trembling, unable to tell whether he had spoken to ghosts or to his own echo, finally answering back after centuries of silence. He picked up his notebook, now lying open on the ground. New words had appeared in the old ink. The chamber is open. The 13th listens. He touched the ink. It was warm, and behind him, somewhere deep in the shadows, one of the 12 stone chairs shifted, just slightly, as though someone had finally exhaled